Well, g'day there, it's Nigel here from Sax School. Welcome to our Sax School Live session number 7. That's this many. We've got tons of stuff we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about ligatures, we're going to talk about mouthpiece position, and we're also going to talk about getting the perfect saxophone practice schedule. It's a really important topic. So thanks a bunch for sticking around and joining me on this Monday night. We're just basically going to hang out. I'm going to answer your questions, and we're going to have a bunch of fun and talk about saxophone for half an hour or so. So it should be a load of fun. I've got Chris from the team in the studio with me. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing, Nigel?
Good, good, good. So just the two of us today, because she's a bit under the weather, isn't she?
Yeah, a little ill. She had to miss it tonight, but she's still wearing our Sax School t-shirt, so,
So
it's all good.
as are you, Chris. Good to see. Okay, so if you're joining us today, please do jump in the chat and say hi and jump in and say hi and let us know where you're from as well. Also, Claire is on the call, so she will be answering some comments as well. So I should tell you who I am. My name's Nigel. If we've not met before, I run this thing called Sax School. Now, Sax School is this big sort of interactive online community of saxophone learners. We've got thousands of people using Sax School, whether they're brand new to saxophone or they're coming back to saxophone after a bunch of years, or even if they're out playing with bands. The cool thing about Sax School is there's a huge library of lessons so you can explore and find what you want to learn and then learn at your own pace. And the other cool thing about it is there's so many people using Sax School. We've got a very international community of learners, and they're also very active communicators. So we've got a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that's only for members, and it's just a really cool place to be because there's so much support and encouragement going on in there, and people are doing loads of learning, and it's really, really great to see. So if you want to find out about Sax School, you can get a 30-day trial at McGillmusic.com. Get in there, kick the tires around, try a bunch of the lessons and see if it's right for you. I think you're absolutely going to love it. Okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about today, but before we get started, let's do a quiz, because we've been doing a quiz each week so far over the last few weeks, and it's been a lot of fun. So I've got a special quiz for you today, and here's the question. Now, I've been out this week talking to Average White Band and meeting them, and really cool guys. They've been around a long time. You probably know the tune Pick Up the Pieces. But can you tell me what's the name of the saxophone player that back in 1975 recorded the solo on Pick Up the Pieces? The original sax player with Average White Band, 1975, Pick Up the Pieces. If you know who that is, and you're a bunch of clever people, so I'm sure you do, stick it in the comments, and at the end of the session today, I'll be letting you know too. So if you're not sure, stick around to the end. And I'm sure, what do you reckon, Chris? We've had a few people get this right every single time, haven't we?
We have, yeah. We've got some smart people in Sax School.
We have
keeping their eye on those questions.
We do, yeah. So okay, that should be fun to see what happens. So I've already got I've had some great questions this week that I want to cover. If you've got some questions, something you need some help with, stick it in the comments as well. I'll get Chris and Claire to let me know about those, and we'll try and answer some of them today too. But I thought before we get started with some questions, I'll give you a bit of an update on what I've been up to this week. Always busy here. I'm putting out new lessons for Sax School all the time. So I've been very busy creating some new content for Sax School this week. In fact, I've been working on a new course that's going to be coming out later on in the year, something a little bit different. We're doing an introduction to classical saxophone, which I think is going to be a really fun course. Not because I think it's good for everybody to just be classical saxophone players, but because I think to round out your skills as a saxophone player, whether you're interested in funk or ska or bebop or pop sax, whatever, playing a bit of classical repertoire and understanding why that helps your technique is really, really important, because there's certain technical things in there that I think really boost your playing, your tone production, your technique, and it'll make you a better ska player or a better blues player or a better, pop player. So that's something I've been working on. Also this week, I did a really cool video this week with Theo 1A. So I'm a Theo 1A artist. I play Theo 1A mouthpieces on all my saxophones. I really like them, and I've been playing them for a while now. But I had a good question from Sax School. Well, something that's popped up a few times really. It's about rubber versus metal mouthpieces. Which is the right one to go for? And I've tried to answer this a few times before, but I thought, why not go and talk to the master himself, Theo? He's basically generally regarded as one of the the most important mouthpiece manufacturers in the world these days. So he's a good guy to talk about these things. I made a video for the YouTube channel, and we'll put a link in the show notes as well. That's definitely some interesting content in there. We got some good feedback from that. Actually, Chris, we had some good feedback from that video, didn't we?
We did, yeah. We had quite a few comments on that. We had a few comments in the Facebook group as well this week.
Yeah.
We had John McCart asking for advice on the top F sharp in Danny Boy, and he got a lot of good support from people in Sax School. Got a reply from you as well. And
do you see, that's what I'm talking about with the support inside the Sax School members area, and I love that really. So people are posting questions in there all the time. I get in to answer them, but within the Sax School community, we get a lot of encouragement and support as well. That's great to hear that John got a good answer from that.
Yeah, he said it's amazing to be sitting here in Belfast and getting help from literally all around the world with the power of Sax School.
The power of Sax School! Awesome. Okay, that's really, really cool. So maybe we'll come back to a couple of those stories in a minute too. So I've been busy with making that Theo Wane video, making the new lessons for Sax School. I also did a really fun thing this week. I went and saw Average White Band play here in England. They were actually playing kind of local to me, and I caught up with there's 2 saxophone players in that band now. So they're doing a big UK tour, and they're a busy band, but sounding absolutely amazing. The 2 sax players, a guy called Fred Vidger, who I did an interview with a couple of years ago, really interesting chap, and another really great alto player called Cliff Lyons. And I was hanging out with them after the show and having a good chat about what they're doing with the band and all that sort of stuff. It was really, really interesting actually. So if you get a chance to see Average White Band, I think they're actually playing in Ronnie Scott's in London over the next couple of weeks. Might be sold out. But if you get a chance to catch them here or in America or whatever country you're in, I definitely suggest it. They've been around for such a long time, but they're still sounding great. And actually, it was quite interesting to talk to Fred and Cliff about how they approach the horn section playing in that band, because they're super tight, just the 2 of them, but they're getting a really, really great sound. So that's what I've been up to this week. So what about you, Chris? Apart from the comments you've already told me about, what else has been going on? Because Chris is looking after the Facebook group all the time, so what's happening in there?
Yeah, so like I said, we've seen John McCart, he's been posting about Danny Boy. We've also seen Rob Allen sharing his Day 8 practice challenge.
Oh, he's doing the 30-day challenge.
He's doing the 30-day challenge.
I saw that video actually. That was a really good video.
It was a very good video, yeah. He was playing Round Midnight by Thelonious Monk, doing a very good job of it as well.
Yeah, he's a nice player actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 30-day challenge, we get a lot of videos in the Facebook group from people doing that. If you're not a Sax School member, so we run this thing called the 30-day practice challenge, which is a load of fun actually. There's a worksheet that you download, and the idea is to go through the routine of practicing every day for 30 days and logging your practice. And we really celebrate it inside Sax School because it's a great way to build the habit of practicing. You'll know that. I used to teach you, Chris, didn't I, years ago, and I probably gave you a hard time about practicing back then. But it's good to see that.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to get into a good practice schedule, and the 30-day challenge really does help with that. So.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. What do you reckon? Should we do some questions?
Yeah, let's do some questions.
Let's do some questions. Okay, so don't forget, if you've got a question, pop it in the chat, and we'll try and get through as many as we can today. And one other thing I'm going to ask you, actually, I love doing these Sax School Lives. We do them really just to get together and have a bit of a chat about saxophone and help people like you. And you could really help us by sharing this live session on your Facebook thing. So just click that share button, and it'll help to get the word out to other people. It's good. We might be able to help some more people as well. So if you could really help us out by clicking that share button, that'd be brilliant. Okie dokie. So I had, a bunch of good questions. This is the first one that I thought was good to have a chat about. So Paul was saying, Paul was asking, what percentage of time should I spend in my practice for practicing with paper studies, like writing out scales and all that sort of stuff, versus actually practicing on my saxophone? And it's a really good question, that. And actually, I like to talk a lot about practice schedule. But I thought this was an interesting variation on the question because not many people had asked about practicing the theory side alongside the playing side. And I definitely think that it's good to get a balance of the 2. Now, if you're just getting started with saxophone, chances are you're not that excited about doing the theory side, writing out scales and learning harmony and all that sort of stuff. But if you've been playing for a little while, then I definitely think it is something that's worth investing some time into. But there's lots of different ways you could approach that. Inside Sax School, we've got some mini courses on things like scales and understanding jazz modes, and they're a good starting point. But there's also lots of great resources we can get for like music theory. So for example, in England, I know in Australia as well, we have music examination boards, and you can actually buy the books that people might use if they're going through the exam process in school. Now, the music books for those, I always think, are a little bit geared toward kids, and they're not as much fun as an adult to learn. However, the theory books are brilliant. So if you want to really get your head around some theory, like the general overview of theory, then those books are a great starting point. But there's lots of different things you can do, even just going through the process of writing out scales or writing out anchor notes for chords if you're working on a piece of music, that sort of stuff. And there's lessons inside Sax School to help you with that. But to answer your question, Paul, I really think that you should think of the theory side of things as a separate part of your practice to playing. I think it's more important to focus on your, when doing your playing part of your practice, to think about how you break down and segment that part of your practice. So personally, I would say, have your playing routine, your practice schedule worked out properly. So like I've talked about a number of times before, and in my book, The Ultimate Guide to Practicing Saxophone, break down your practice into 4 different elements. So you're working on some theory, you're working on some new stuff, you're doing a good warm-up, you're playing something fun, and get that all organized. But then maybe, so let's say for example, if you're doing that in the morning, then do it at a separate time when you're doing your music theory practice, and keep it as a separate thing. And I would approach that completely separately, so you can devote a separate amount of time to that, because there's so much stuff about the way that we practice on our instruments that needs to be divided up properly so that we can get the most benefit from it. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, you let me know in a comment or give me a thumbs up, because I'm really a big advocate for the whole thing about getting your practice time right. What do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, always important to get your practice schedule up and running, and dividing it into segments is really crucial. Help you work on all sorts of different subjects, not just playing your pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I know, Chris, you've been through the whole exam process here in England, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Right to the very top, and on clarinet as well as saxophone. So I can imagine as you're going through that, there's loads of scales to learn, and there's loads of stuff that you need to memorize.
Yeah.
So I know you've always been very pragmatic in your practice, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Looking at all sorts of different areas really does help especially when you're playing. Even theory does carry across to playing, so it's worth doing.
Yeah, cool. All right, awesome. So I hope that's helped you, Paul. And if anybody else on the call that makes sense to you, just let us know in a comment. It's good to know. Okay, now I had another great question. Now this was something that popped up in our Sax School members area this week, and it was about mouthpiece position. And the question was, actually I can't remember who this was from. But they were asking, they were saying they're using their tuner to set up the mouthpiece when they're practicing. So they've got the mouthpiece and they're adjusting it, the position on the neck with the tuner when they're practicing. However, when they come back the next day, and they're also putting a mark around the cork here, so they knew where the mouthpiece had to go. But when they came back the next day, the tuning was completely out. They were getting really frustrated about what was going on there. So I thought it was a really good question, and I thought I'd just spend a couple of minutes to have a chat about this, because it's something, particularly if you're relatively new to saxophone, that could be a bit confusing, or if you've just never, if you only ever played by yourself and you've never really looked at tuning, then this is something that's definitely important to be aware of. First thing, okay, so proper nuts and bolts stuff. The mouthpiece, you can adjust it in or out on the cork to get the overall tuning lower or higher, okay? So it's pretty simple. If you think that you push the mouthpiece on, it effectively makes the instrument smaller, that's going to make the sound higher. Or you pull it out to make the whole instrument longer, and that's going to make the sound lower. Now that's the first thing. However, this thing's made of metal, and metal's going to change depending on the temperature. So it's always a good idea to blow a bit of air through your saxophone and play a few notes first to get the instrument up to a sort of the ambient temperature before you check your tuning. Now in England, it's been super hot lately. So your instrument, the tuning's going to change because everything's hotter than normal. But in the winter in England, the saxophone gets really cold. And so equally, that's going to make it very different from when you first pick up your saxophone, pull it out of its case, put it together, to when you've been playing for a couple of minutes, because the metal is all going to warm up and it's going to change the tuning dramatically. So that's why it's really, really important to blow through the instrument first to get it to that, like the sort of temperature it's going to be when you're performing, then check out the tuning. Okay, and I think that's probably what's going wrong with this question. So once you've got your instrument warmed up a little bit, bung your tuner on, start in the middle of the range, somewhere around a C or a G, something like that, or maybe an octave D. And you want to check the tuning of your note with the tuner itself, and try and adjust your mouthpiece in and out to get a position where it's pretty much on the mark. And the other thing to do is then check the top of your range, the bottom of your range, until you can find a point where, on average, for the whole of your saxophone, you've got the mouthpiece in the right position. And then once you've got that right, grab a pencil, stick a line around it, and then you know where to come back to. But of course, don't forget, when you do pick up your saxophone the next day, you've got to get it up to temperature first before you check it with your tuner again. Hope that makes sense. What do you think about it, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. It's not really much to add. Long-term practice will really help with those inconsistencies in your tuning, but for your overall tuning, you've got to find that middle ground by warming up and doing everything that Nigel's just said.
Yeah, you really do need to. And you're right about long tones, Chris, because the other thing that's happening if you're pretty new to saxophone is your embouchure is constantly changing. So your muscles are developing, and it's going to make the mouthpiece, we talked a bit about this last week actually, it's going to make the mouthpiece feel different in your mouth. And so, you need to be a little bit flexible, but always get yourself up to temperature first, then check your tuning. And the other thing finally I want to say about this is I think it's a really good idea to monitor your tuning all the time. In fact, you could even have your tuner on your music stand with you when you're practicing, and every now and then through your piece of music, stop on a note and then glance over and just check where your tuning is up to. Because it's difficult when you're playing by yourself. Sometimes it's difficult to spot tuning issues, and every saxophone has got certain notes where the tuning is going to be an issue. It might be a high D on the palm key or an octave G, but it'll be a note that isn't quite in tune with the rest of your saxophone. So you need to be aware of that, and that's why keeping an eye on your tuner is really, really important. Coolio. Hey, if that makes sense to you, or if you've got any other things to add about that, let us know in a comment, because it'd be good for us to get some feedback on if you found that that's helped you. How are we getting on with the comments there, Chris?
Yeah, good. We've got a few questions in. Before we do, we've got a funny comment from Dennis Jones saying, we just had a rainstorm in Birmingham. Well, 5 minutes of drizzle, but that's the first for 5 weeks.
Wow,
I know,
cool.
It's amazing. Look forward for it coming our way at some point soon.
Yeah, well, you're like a couple hours south of us, so maybe. It's been so hot here. Well, you're in Leeds, right, Chris?
Yes, I'm in Leeds.
It's been hot up there too?
So warm in Leeds,
yeah. It's been hot. Can't complain. Been set out in the garden. It's been like Australia. It's been fantastic.
We've also had some other questions. We've got one from Nigel Bradshaw, who says, when playing a low C, I can't hold a continuous tone. It oscillates on the pitch, but all of the above notes are okay.
Yeah,
Suggestions for that?
Is that from Nigel Bradshaw? Yeah. So Nigel, if that happens, most commonly it's because something's going wrong down here with your ceiling. So it's a good chance that, it might be your low C key, but it might also be something up here that's not quite sealing. So I did some videos, some YouTube videos, and we'll put this in the show notes, where I was talking about saxophone maintenance with Steve Crow, fantastic saxophone repairer. And we did talk a little bit about this and identifying leaks at the bottom end of your saxophone. So you could experiment with little things like your embouchure, try relaxing your jaw a little bit more, experiment with how much mouthpiece you're using, but I would suspect it's got something to do with the leak. Now, just because it's a leak doesn't mean that it's a big issue. It's not going to necessarily be really expensive or complicated to fix. Often, it can, your saxophone might have just taken a little bump, or, it's often a really, really quick fix. But I would go, if you've got a repairer close to you, Nigel, that you could get them to have a look at, I would do that, because they might be able to fix that. It's not fun, is it, when you're low notes?
No, never fun. I've had that issue before, especially in some pretty important occasions, and getting it fixed quickly is a bit stressful, but it does get fixed. Yeah,
I think checking out that video that I made is good. There's a little series of videos we made on that, and it's good to know a bit about the repair process yourself, because a lot of these things, you with a little bit of knowledge, if you're technical minded, you could actually fix some of these yourself. It also helps you to diagnose the problem. So yeah. Any other comments?
We've got a question from Daryl Hubbard, who says, Nigel, can you give me your opinion on Ligature reeds?
Oh, well, Daryl, you've asked the right guy about Leger reeds because I love Leger reeds. I think they're fantastic. Now, I should say that up until about 18 months ago, I thought every synthetic reed was absolutely rubbish. And actually, I am a Leger artist now, but it didn't happen by them contacting me. I actually contacted them because I started experimenting with Leger reeds, and I bought a few and tried them out. And in the past, I've tried lots of other synthetic reeds, just about everyone that's on the market actually, and I always hated them because I would always break them or wear them out, particularly if I was playing on a loud gig. So they're always a bit disappointing to me, or I thought the sound was too bright. But the Leger, and actually if I'm brutally honest, the standard Legers, I don't really like those. But the Leger signature reeds, I really like them because they feel to me like a cane reed. And actually when I'm playing them, they sound just like a cane reed to me. But I can pick my saxophone up every day and it plays great. And in fact, every saxophone I've got has got a Leger reed on it. I really, really like them. So I'm an artist now, and they actually send me free Leger reeds, so I'm kind of lucky. But like I said, I did actually go out and buy a bunch of them myself first because I do generally like them. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I was talking to the two guys, the Average White Band guys, actually, Cliff and Fred, and neither of them used them. They didn't, they didn't particularly like them. But lots of pro players that I know do play them. In fact, go online and have a look. It's quite surprising the number of people who are using them now. It's just, because the sound is good, but mostly it's the convenience. It's just fantastic. Cool. We've got loads of questions, haven't we?
I know, it's good, yeah.
Right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to crack on and cover a couple of these other ones in here because this is a fun question. So I had a question from Mark. And so Mark's saying, I've been on holidays, lucky you, Mark, in Ibiza. And I was watching a saxophone player over there, and when she first came on, she kept adjusting the tension of a ligature. Does this make a difference to the sound, or was it just as the sax was warming up? Well, first of all, Mark, I'm really glad that you went to Ibiza on a holiday. It sounds lovely. Actually, I've not been to Ibiza, have you?
I haven't been to Ibiza.
No. So, okay, good question. Now, you see a lot of people do that, fiddling with their ligature. I don't think personally that she was probably not doing anything specific, but I think it's important for us to have a quick chat about ligatures and the purpose of them so we understand what's going on there. Because actually I've got some here, look. I've got tons of different ligatures here. Look at these different ligatures, lots of different styles of ligatures. And they all basically do the one job though, right? Which is hold the reed onto the mouthpiece. And the important thing about a ligature is it needs to support that reed, hold it in place, and then also allow the reed to vibrate. So for everybody on the call today, when you're putting your ligature on, whether it's one that screws on from the bottom like this, or one of these fancy ones that screws on from the top, or like a Rovner, these are very popular, I love these actually. Rovner ligatures, again, screws in from the top. You only need to do it up just tight enough so that the reed won't move. And maybe she was making sure that her reed was, firm enough. You don't want to have it too firm. Over and above that, it doesn't need to do anything else. And there's lots of discussion about which ligatures are better. And actually, to be fair, I have reviewed a lot of ligatures, and we'll put a link to them in the show notes. Personally, as a player, I find that I like certain ligatures over other ones. But the difference is really to me in the way the reed responds and the way it sounds in my head, because my head is attached to the mouthpiece when I'm playing. From the audience's point of view, I don't think that there's a great deal of difference. What do you think, Chris? Do you think there's much difference from an audience point of view with ligatures?
No, I think it's mostly personal preference. Some people would recommend others or some over others, but I think for the most part there are other larger factors that affect your sound, like mouthpieces and working on your tone and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But that being said, when you find a ligature that you like, it can, because it does affect the way the reed vibrates, it'll affect the way the reed performs for you. And so that could have a difference with low notes, altissimo notes, overall the body of the sound. And like I was saying about your head being connected to your mouthpiece, because you got your teeth on there, right? So those vibrations of that mouthpiece and the saxophone are coming through your whole body. So you do get a different feel back. So for example, I love the Rovner ligature in comparison to your standard cheapo wire one like that. These work fine, but these work better and they sound nicer and warmer to me. But even better still, this Winslow ligature, they're called something else now, I can't remember what they're called, but these Winslows are incredible. They work well, and from my point of view as a player, this really thin Theo 1A ligature, I really like this one, and the Silverstein Works string ligatures are one of my favorites, particularly if you're playing like trying to get a really dark sound. And there's a link, we'll put a link in the show notes for my review of those. I think they're amazing. Quite expensive, but they're really, really good. Okay, so I hope that's helped you. If you've got any questions about ligatures, or if that makes any sense to you, let us know in the comments or give us a thumbs up as well, because it'd be good to know. Okay, cool. I had one other quick question here, and that was about Gerard McChrystal. Who was asking me that? John McCart was saying, have I heard of Gerard McChrystal? I'm interested in his classical style. He's amazing. He's like a monster classical player. Yeah, I have. Definitely think he's amazing. And like I was saying earlier on, even if you're not that into classical saxophone, I definitely suggest you check him out. Rightio, Chris, we got any other quick questions before we wrap up?
Yes, we have one from Nasima, who says, how do you get started in improvisation?
That is a great question, Nasima, and it's not something I can answer super quick, but inside Sax School I've got a bunch of courses that will guide you through that process really easily. I think the biggest thing about learning to improvise, Nasima, is having a structure and a basic game plan. You need to have a strategy for what you're doing, because a lot of people sort of jump in without having any sort of understanding, and that makes the process very frustrating and very, very difficult. But if you have a simple framework, then actually improvising is really easy to get started with. So in Sax School, I've got a bunch of little courses that will guide you through that, where we start doing things like just playing with, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 notes over a single chord, and sort of working our way out from there and looking at different styles as well. So there's a ton of resources inside Sax School. If you're not a member, then check out the 30-day trial. If you are a member, then just go into the members area and click on the improvising tab, and there's a bunch of stuff in there. Also on my YouTube channel, I've got a couple of little warm-up exercises that are a good starting point for that too. I've got my improv warm-up workout, which is something worth looking at. Cool. Well, we're almost out of time, Chris.
We are,
How did that happen?
Time flies, Nigel, when we're having fun in Sax School.
think
All of these great questions. I can't get through them all, but we'll definitely keep a log of them and try and get through them.
Yeah, write down the ones that we didn't get through, because we'll come back to them. Oh, and that reminds me, you know what we need to do is come back to the quiz. So the quiz, average white band. Who was the saxophone player who played on their classic 1975 track, Pick Up the Pieces? I should ask you, Chris, did we get any people?
We did not.
We got no people.
Well, here's the thing though. We had a couple of people who said Roger Ball, and Roger Ball is the person who wrote, well, part of at least, the melody from Pick Up the Pieces, but that's not the person who played the solo. The solo player.
Ah, right. Okay, that's interesting. Well, it's good. Ah, we finally stumped them. Okay, so the saxophone player for the 1975 recording of Pick Up the Pieces is this chap, Malcolm Molly Duncan. And actually he's an interesting character. So he was in the band in the 70s through into the 80s, I suppose, but then he's left and did other stuff. And he's still around. In fact, he's still around doing things now and touring and putting his other projects together. So here's a guy, you can check him out on YouTube. There's some stuff on YouTube. And there's also, with that Pick Up the Pieces, there's a great recording where they did, was it like a live concert? Michael Brecker's playing on it as well. So yeah, really, really cool. I think it's fun to go back and have a look at who these original players are, and to check them out too, because that Pick Up the Pieces, for example, was a million-selling record in 1975, and there's a reason for that. You know, it's great music, and it's a great solo. So it's good to check that out. Also, actually, I was talking about the average white band earlier on. So Fred Vidger, who's playing with them now, he's a great player, and he's a really great melody player. Actually, I should get together with him and make a YouTube video. I think that'd be a whole lot of fun, because it really, in that style of playing, he's really got that stuff down. So it's good to see. Okay, so just before we finish up, a couple things to tell you about. So this is the last live session in this season. We're going to be taking a few weeks off, and then we'll be kicking off again for the next season of Sax School Live in September. So we've got a few weeks away. So I like to set you guys a bit of a challenge, and I thought for over the summer, maybe a good challenge for you guys would be to have a go at the 30-day practice challenge yourself. If you've not done it before, if you are a Sax School member and you've not done it before, then check out the 30-day practice challenge inside Sax School and be a part of it. And if you're not a member, why don't you jump in, get a 30-day trial to Sax School, and at the same time do the 30-day practice challenge, because honestly, it's one of the best things you can do with your practice. It doesn't matter if you've been playing for years already or if you're just getting started. Going through that process of getting yourself to practice every day and becoming accountable for 30 days does so much good for your practice habits. And there are just a ton of great stories, don't you think, Chris? Inside Sax School, there's a ton of great stories of people who've done that 30-day practice challenge.
There are, yeah. People like Saku, actually, who are, going on to do gigs in Sri Lanka in 3 different languages, and
really
thanking us for helping her get through Sax School and get ready to perform. But the 30-day challenge as well is probably a big part of that.
Yeah, that's a great story from Saku, and we hear that story a lot, Chris, don't we? Where people either they're just coming back to saxophone or they've been playing for a little while, but go through the practice challenge, and then it just gives them this big boost in their playing all of a sudden. And sometimes, it's always good to get a boost, but sometimes getting that boost can just propel you into a whole new sphere with your playing that you hadn't thought about before. So it's a really good thing to look at. Okay, right. Well, whatever you're up to over the next few weeks, I hope you have some fun. I hope you will take us up on that practice challenge. Keep an eye out for the show notes for this lesson, for this Sax School Live session, which we'll put a link to it in the replay for this probably tomorrow. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah,
probably tomorrow.
I think so.
And don't forget too, you could really help us out by sharing this session on your Facebook page. So what do you think, Chris? We say goodbye?
Yeah, we'll say goodbye for now.
So see you later. Thanks a bunch for sharing your evening with us, and we will catch up with you very soon.